Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Esquire Coaching Radio, where we help attorneys achieve unparalleled personal and professional success. And now here's your host, Ann Jenrette Thomas.
Welcome everyone to Esquire Coaching Radio. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. As you know, Esquire Coaching is a national coaching and consulting firm that is dedicated to helping attorneys achieve extraordinary whole life success. And to that end, we discuss a full range of topics from building business to getting a job to work-life balance and everything in between. Today, we have a very special guest who's going to talk to us about optimizing the relationship between in-house and law firm attorneys. Corporate law departments operate differently than they once did. Whereas they served at one time as processors of outside lawyers' bills, they often take a much more active role in delivering legal service to their companies now. The implications of this development for outside counsel cannot be overstated. So tonight, John Ogden will talk about optimizing the relationship between in-house and law firm attorneys. John is a practical, experienced attorney, including 20 years as a general counsel. He's also a business person and professional association leader. He is the innovation facilitator and president CEO of Innovative Results LLC, which you can find them at www.innovativeresultsllc.com, which he founded in 2004. This company helps optimize activities of buyers and sellers in the legal marketplace. John is also of counsel in the Montvale, New Jersey office of the New York law firm of Falcon & Singer, PC, falconsinger.com, where his focus is primarily on corporate and commercial transactions as well as dispute resolution, including litigation as needed for closely held companies. John graduated from Villanova University and Fordham University School of Law, and he has attended and presented numerous CLEs and other professional development programs. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
It's so great to have you here. Before I dive into the questions, I just want to remind our callers that there will be time at the end of this interview to ask John any direct questions you may have. You simply have to call 347-838-8719 and press 1 to get in the queue. That's 347-838-8719 and press 1 to get in the queue. All right, John. So let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Well, the majority of my career was spent as an in-house attorney and business person. I was, as you mentioned in the intro, general counsel of a manufacturing company for 20 years, most of which time I had several other business departments reporting to me. So I have a background in law and business. I also got very active in association work, professional association work, primarily the Association of Corporate Counsel, where I served as a board member and officer. I've always been a volunteer, very active volunteer, and within the past few years I've turned that into pro bono practice, both as a practicing attorney and through vehicles such as the pro bono committee of the New York City Bar Association, where I try to have a broader impact than just one client at a time. Although one client at a time is very fulfilling and recommended to anybody looking for life-work balance. Additionally, I founded Innovative Results LLC about 10 years ago, and I'm currently running that along with, as you mentioned, my of-counsel relationship with Falcon & Singer, a firm founded by another in-house attorney, just very similar background, and there I work with closely held corporations, doing corporate work, doing dispute resolution, including litigation, about half of my time, and hoping to get into a specialty practice of theirs for special needs individuals. So between Falcon & Singer and Innovative Results, that's how I spend my time these days.
Oh, that's great. So I know that in the introduction I mentioned just briefly a little bit about Innovative Results, but can you tell us a little bit more about that company as well?
Sure. I found about 10 years ago that my experience as an in-house attorney, where I both practiced law and litigated in-house, which is somewhat unusual, but also naturally had to retain counsel in various other jurisdictions here and abroad. Combining that along with my experience in corporate counsel associations, I had something to offer both sides of the legal buy transaction. I started off helping what is now a thriving company in the alternative legal market called Axiom Legal. I was a consultant to them early in their process. I've done things like run law firm retreats. In addition to law firms, I've helped legal service providers such as e-discovery suppliers to enter the in-house market. And finally, it was a contract that I had with the Association of Corporate Counsel's Greater New York chapter, during which I spent 3 years as executive director of the chapter, and did all that entailed a lot of CLE programs and got practice networks up and running, and it was very challenging and interesting.
It does sound both challenging and interesting. So, one of the things that I think I wanted to have this conversation specifically about the relationship between in-house and law firm attorneys. Tell me, how have you seen the relationship between law firms and law departments change over the years?
Well, I think, again, in your introduction, you were spot on in terms of how the relationship used to function. There were places where basically in-house lawyers received the bills and passed them along to maybe the CEO who played golf with the managing partner of the law firm, and there wasn't a whole lot to be done there. Those days are long since passed. I've been practicing for a long time, so I can remember those days. But, for example, things like when Ben Heineman was general counsel of GE, he hired people to be general counsel of their various divisions right out of partnerships at the big law firms. And that, along with, if I do say so myself, since I was part of it, the Association of Corporate Counsel had a lot to do with increasing the role and responsibilities and visibility of in-house counsel.
So what do you think about, what specifically have you seen as some of the changes aside from cost? Is there anything else that you've noticed in terms of what the difference is, what corporate counsel is looking for when they're looking to hire a law firm?
There's no single answer, of course, to that question. It depends on what the matter is. It depends on what the corporation is. But more than anything else, this is still a profession based on relationships. It may not be the relationship over the golf course that it once was, but I would always retain, this is a cliche, but I would always retain specific attorneys rather than firms. I wanted somebody who I knew had the insight and the energy to address the matter that I had, at least as well as I would or any of the people on my staff. And that holds true today, too.
Well, I think that's really important, especially because part of the work that we do here is we encourage our attorneys to really not only develop their skill base, but also their brand. And it sounds like if you're not going with just a particular firm, just for the firm's sake, but looking at individual attorneys, it would make it easier that as they develop themselves professionally, their brand as an attorney, that it would make it easier for outside counsel to be able to say, okay, look, so-and-so is really good at this particular issue and we want them. So That makes a lot of sense. Now,
well, I think if I could just take a moment for an unabashed commercial for pro bono there. I've recently done a couple of programs for the Legal Marketing Association that address the benefits of law firm attorneys doing pro bono projects with in-house attorneys. It's a great way to meet on common ground that both people feel are important, and it's just, I don't mean to be cynical, I'm very big on pro bono, but if you're going to do it anyway, it's a very useful way of developing relationship with corporate counsel.
Actually, that's a brilliant idea. I mean, it's maximizing, you know, the use of that time and also still doing really good work. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, this current strong emphasis on cost. Is this good or bad for the relationship?
Well, again, and this is probably a preamble to every answer I'll give you. It depends.
Right.
Of course, on the situation, on the client, on the law firm, et cetera. But I think we're at a time where there's no doubt that the cost element is causing a lot of aggravation on both sides of the transaction. Law firms feel under undue pressure, sometimes corporate counsel, and this is something law firms should understand, is in most cases, corporate counsel are also under pressure from typically the CFO or perhaps the purchasing department or that sort of thing. Whereas it may appear that this relationship among professionals has now just turned into an in-house lawyer dickering over price with retained counsel. It's important for retained counsel to know that dialogue does not grow out of a vacuum. It's cost pressure being felt throughout the corporation. And I think one of the things that they need to focus on is not so much the cost as the value being given. If you can get a client to focus on value and you deliver that value, then I think you're back into the relationship realm as opposed to the delivering legal services as a commodity realm.
That's a great point. Can you expand upon what you mean by value?
To a large extent, it's just plain and simple what the English word means. It's rather than placing the emphasis on the cost, it's what are you getting for the money? You can obviously, and without casting aspersions on anybody, I think one example of not necessarily getting value are some companies, particularly insurance companies, who just drive the cost down so much with their law firms that they're in a position that they just can't deliver quality service. I saw that many times when we had counsel provided by insurance companies when I was in-house. It just was, that to me is the epitome of what is not value. They're just looking at cost. And I think if people wanted to go to www.acc.com, there's extensive material on what they call the value challenge. And I would say most of that is driven by large companies, but I think small companies can pick and choose what might work best for them.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you think outside of insurance, do you see the same drive to keep the cost so low impacting other types of industries as well?
Yes, industries and specific companies. I would say that since I have very little direct experience with very large companies putting too much pressure on their law firms, I hesitate to mention names, but a search of recent literature would come up with some well-known Fortune 50 companies that have overdone it in the cost control side of the equation.
Wow, and what I'm hearing you say is that in their effort to do that, it's really impacted the quality of the legal representation and the deliveries, I'm imagining.
Yes, there are many people whose opinion I respect who make that argument. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's sticking with this cost element for a moment. Do you have thoughts about the increasing involvement of corporate procurement or sourcing organizations in the retention of counsel?
Yes, and in addition to my previous omnibus preamble, let me just say that
let's just say that goes for all your answers.
That goes for all the answers. This one I have an additional element to the preamble, and that is I went to law school at night and worked in a corporate purchasing department during the day. I think of those days fondly because I had full tuition aid, so that may affect my judgment. And also for about 15 years, in addition to being general counsel, was responsible for the procurement function of my company. So I come at it from that perspective. I have a background in procurement. But I don't think the current involvement of procurement is necessarily all good or all bad. It very much depends on the approach taken by the legal department, the sourcing department or procurement or whatever the name of the day is, and the law firm. And by that I mean that there are plenty of professionals in the procurement function that know what they're doing, that understand value, and can help a legal department, and even, believe it or not, help a law firm together come up with the right equation. That a law firm can make money, because there's nothing wrong with making money. Nobody's trying to take profits, well, perhaps some profits away from law firms.
Some profits, yeah.
And everybody's in a profit-making business. But if you get a good, solid procurement specialist, and some of them are attorneys also, on your side, that can be good. However, in-house counsel, and even to the extent that they can make their voices heard, law firms should not be hesitant about saying, look, all these people are doing is asking for hourly rates and giving the work to the ones with the lowest hourly rates, which is patently absurd because firms can just increase the number of hours they spend, and you're not getting any value for that. But it is something, I'm certain this is not a fad. This is something that everybody's going to have to learn to deal with, either work well with the good ones, or if you've got a bad one, have your general counsel go to CFO or wherever she or he needs to go to get that worked out and say, look, we understand the need for these folks to be involved, but you've got to be a little more sophisticated. A good number of years ago, in the late 70s, when I was an industrial purchasing agent, the company where I was at was horrified that I had gotten involved in the retention of engineering firms. This is a very engineering-intensive organization, and typically the engineering department would hire outside engineers. So that was 30-some-odd years ago, and it's just reaching the legal department. So it's here to stay, and work with the good ones and try to fix the bad ones.
That makes a lot of sense. And I bet you have some real insight because of your history in that field that you might be able to even glean some lessons from that and apply it to the legal industry now.
Yes.
Is there any that you'd want to share, just any one or two insights that you might have around that?
Well, I think there are concepts called value engineering and supplier integration that apply more in the manufacturing realm. But just to give a very brief example, I wrote an article probably about 10 or 12 years ago called Synchronization, in which I argued the legal department needed to get closer with management or whomever their client was, understand what their goals were, and work not just in a vacuum, oh, look, I won this case. Yeah, you get twice as much as you should have, but in terms of its value to the company. I would sit down once a year with company management and say, okay, here are the types of cases that are core cases. We'll fight to the mat on that. Here are important cases, and here are other cases where you just look at them and say, you know, if we can settle them and make them go away, let's do that. It's not worth spending time and money. And so when a matter would come along, everybody knew, okay, it fits in this category, and here's the amount of effort. So you're not having that discussion every single time. I've been kicking around the concept of a synchronization too, where instead of going upstream to the client, to the internal client, the legal department would go outside to the law firms and find out things like, okay, what's going on in your work process for us that could be streamlined without affecting service. If there's for example, a licensing agreement that comes up multiple times a month, and we historically have been getting it on a 2-week turnaround time, comments from the law firm. And they're really jumping through hoops. It's very inefficient. They have to put too many associates on it, et cetera. And lo and behold, we check with our client upstream, and they don't really need it for a month. So we say, okay, take a month, take a little more time, have a few experts so that you don't have to have 5 associates who might pick it up. Have 2 associates who really know what they're doing and can do it quickly, so don't need to worry about the calendar so much as they do about the clock, if that makes sense. And then everybody's happy. The law department has checked with the in-house department that uses those licenses, and the law firm is able to operate more efficiently. And somewhere along the line, we have a kumbaya moment, and everybody splits the savings in there.
That's a great illustration. In fact, Don, if you would be willing, we'd love to share your article on our blog, just so people can get a little bit more in depth in what you just described.
Okay, that's still in the contemplative stage because that approach does not take into account big data, which people are falling in love with in the whole legal department, law firm connection.
That's actually a great segue, because my next question was about the use of big data in choosing law firms and negotiating alternative fee arrangements. So talk to us about that.
Well, I think it's a wonderful tool. I mean, you can get an answer to your question of the last 10 product liability cases in this jurisdiction, what was this law firm's ratio of associates to partners on these matters, even down to the level of junior associates versus senior associates. And you could tell them, look, we think it's costing too much because you're putting too much partner time on this or something like that. That sort of thing, I know there are good, well-managed legal departments who find value in that, but that to me is micromanaging. I think you have to be very careful with big data, as with anything. Be careful what you measure, because people will work to what you're measuring. So I've been a big fan of metrics throughout my career, and I've written some on that and spoken some on that. But you've got to do a lot of time at the front end making sure what you're measuring is the right, gives you the right outcome so that you can manage the process.
Absolutely. Now, what about mid-market companies and their law firms? Can they benefit from recent developments in the way law firms and legal departments interact?
I think for that answer, I would harken back. I don't know who says harken anymore, but I would refer back to the discussion on synchronization, supplier integration, value engineering. I think that's something that companies of any size could apply.
Okay, great. And I think you really did give us a very good breakdown of what that is. Now,
yeah.
I know that you have worked. Sorry, was there more you wanted to say about that?
No, I just said I hope so. Sorry.
Now, I know that you've worked extensively with law firm networks. Can you talk a little bit more about them?
I'm an enormous fan of law firm networks, particularly for mid-sized companies. And there are many good networks. I happen to be very familiar with Veritas and with the network of trial law firms. Let me use an example with Veritas. There were places around the world where I had good representation and not so good representation. What Veritas does, they're basically a commercial law firm, law network. I know they've branched out from that, but I would use them mostly for setting up a subsidiary in a company or ensuring compliance or that. And they did such a good job of quality assurance that I would just, for example, contact the Veritas firm in Argentina. Somebody would say, well, who is that? And I don't think the firm was always necessarily too happy about it, but I would say, I have no idea who it is. I remember that you talked earlier about branding. That's the brand I know. I know that they do good quality control, and I know that the service I get in Argentina will be just as good as the service I would get in Indiana or wherever I might be retaining them. And I think that if you're a huge company and you've got, if I had in-house counsel in Argentina, that would be a different situation. But for mid-sized companies, finding the right network is just a godsend, rather than just trying to flail about trying to find you the right law firms for you in the right jurisdictions.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Well, John, you're not going to believe this, but we are nearly out of time. So I'd love for you to share with our listeners how they can get a hold of you if they want to contact you or have further questions for you.
Sure. I spend most of my time physically at Falcon and Singer, where my number is area code 201-307-0074. My email is jogden, O-G-D-E-N, at falconsinger.com. For my innovative results activities, my email is john at innovativeresultsllc.com. That's a mouthful, but that's what it is. So, and I'd be glad to talk to folks.
Thank you. And we do have those websites listed on the page for this Blog Talk Radio episode. So, John, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think in line with what you do, the legal profession is under an enormous amount of pressure. The jobs are tough and all that, but it's still a great profession. People can find, maybe a law firm partnership is harder to reach and less attractive than it once was. But I have friends who work in law firm marketing, for example, very sophisticated operations. In compliance, it's a huge issue with Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and all sorts of HIPAA and all sorts of things. So people with law degrees can find very interesting and satisfying careers in a plethora of areas. So I would encourage people to continue to use that law degree in whatever way makes sense for them.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. John, it's been such a pleasure to have you as a guest today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, everyone, I just want you to know that next week we will be talking about how to use LinkedIn more effectively so that you can really grow your business. And I also want to let everyone know that next Tuesday we are releasing our book, The Happy Law Practice, Expert Strategies to Build Business while Maintaining Peace of Mind. It'll be available on Amazon. All right, everyone. Talk to you next week. Thank you.